Hey everyone, welcome back to Unscripted Faith Podcast. I'm Brianna, your host. I am so excited for this episode and just getting kind of back into a groove of things. First off, before we get into anything regarding today's episode, I really just want to reflect on the last episode and just how much impact it was able to make. And first off, I want to start by saying that this podcast, obviously, God led me to it in a heart posture and place of having it just always be about impacting at least one person. Sometimes it can kind of be disheartening, um, knowing whether this is what God wants me to do or not, if, sometimes not many people see it. And it was cool because that was something that I actually was praying to God when I released the last episode that came out. The night that it came out, I think I had like 7 or 8 views, and I was just like, God, like, if you don't want me to do this anymore, you know, like, just take it away from me. And that night, God reminded me of so many different things, but he reminded me of Luke 16:10, which says, if you are faithful with very little, you'll be faithful with much. And if you're dishonest with very little, you'll be dishonest with much. And so God really showed me, like, if you're faithful with the little that I give you, like, it will be amplified and exalted. And so I kind of just was like, okay, God, sat with it. He told me a couple other things regarding just all my thoughts and, having like a human moment. And here we are. The video has like 830 views. We got a bunch of new subscribers. So if you are from the last episode and you're really just starting to get into this podcast, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And I just pray that the last episode was able to bless you and that further episodes would continue to bless you. That's really what it's for. And I just pray that the Lord would continue doing unscripted things with this podcast. Last episode was very bold, and something I don't think I would have posted if I had just started out my podcast. So he's definitely stirring something in me, making it more and more unscripted as the episodes go by. But yeah, I for this episode was really shown this, and I usually always share this, but if you're new, most of the topics that I talk about are things that I've lived through, currently I'm living through, things that I'm struggling with, things that God has shown me through the struggles. And so today is really just kind of reflecting and encouraging just about how to embrace and not miss what God is doing in the season that you're currently in. And so we're obviously now in October, almost in November, which is insane to think about. But it's no longer summer, so the season has actually physically changed in the natural, in what we can see in our eyes. But many of us in so many times of our lives are in seasons, whether it's something as small as you're in a relationship or you're not in a relationship, or you're in a certain career and you're switching careers, you're in school, you're not in school anymore, you've changed, moved states. Like, all these different things can be different types of seasons, and you can be in multiple seasons all at once. But I really just want to talk about how God will not waste the season that you're in. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm ready to get into it. I got my it was hot apple cider in my mug that is a Ray Dunn mug. I know everyone has these, so no judgment. But I loved the colors, so that is a sneak peek to something in the future, but we're not going to talk about it now. But anyways, without further ado, let's just get right into this episode. Okay, so the topic of not rushing and really making sure that you use everything and absorb everything in the season that God has you in right now. And so I was currently in this past summer in a transitional period, and I feel like if you're in a season and you're coming out of a season and you're moving into a new one, you're in the in-between in a transitional season, you can feel it, right? And so I felt it. I was like, I know God is doing something and he's moving me, and there's going to be a lot of change going on moving forward. And I knew that, but I didn't really know what that would look like. And so in the summer, I had basically gotten out of school. I had graduated. I'm like, okay, now what does this look like? And so I went from being in college, spent my whole summer at the job that I've had since I was 15. And I was just chilling there. I was doing my thing, and I was like, God, I felt called to go to a certain place for my career, and it just wasn't opening. The door wasn't opening for that at the time. And then just one day, in the midst of it all, the door opened. So I started to transition, and I had 2 weeks left at my first job. And I just remember saying to myself and those close to me, like, watch how God is going to literally use the last moments of this season, like that I'm in while I'm at this job. Like, watch God use every single last day that I'm here to bring him glory, to do what he needs to do. The harvest is ripe and the harvesters are few. And so I was like, all right, God, like, I don't want to miss anything that you are trying to do even in these last days. Like, we always think about like races, right? We think about running. And for me, I am not a runner. But as you're getting through and you're getting to the finish line, you want to finish strong. And I know that a lot of athletes and stuff like that, that's always said. So it's not a new phrase, but it really is true. Like, you want to finish strong. And so the last, like, I think week I had at that job, I'm just reflecting on everything. Like, I grew up at this place. Like, I'm now in my 20s. So I've been there for a hot minute. And starting at the age of 15, going all the way to my 20s at my first job is a long time. And so I was just reflecting on, like, I grew up here. Like, this, and this happened while I was here. Like, this huge momentous moment happened for me. Like, I found my faith in the midst of me being at this job. Like, I started not really sure, like, where I was at in my faith, and I'm leaving, like, super strong and bold in my faith, and just really reflecting on all these different things and kind of being a little nostalgic, kind of wishing, like, oh man, like, now I'm really getting into my big girl job, which is what I call it, my first full-time big girl job out of college. And I'm just like, man, like, this isn't going to be the same. Like, I'm not going to have the life that I had before, just in regards to, like, when you have your first job and you're working part-time, there's not as much, it's just different requirements, right? So there's different things. And I'm like, wow, like, I'm really growing up. And so I was sitting and just thinking about all these different things. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to enjoy the last however many days I had at that day that I realized it, up until the very last day that I'm there, the last hour, the last minute. And my brother, actually, who's younger than me, who has been on a previous episode, was like, because he's already working his big boy job, if you want to call it that. He also worked at a food store before he came to his big boy job. And he was just like, like, just take in every last moment. Like, you don't want to take it for granted. Like, just there's something about your first job that there's just some things that, like, you are learning, and there's a lot of grace, and there's just a lot of different learning curves. And so, like, being able to have those people around you, and I had a lot of friends I was working with at my first job, I just really wanted to take it in. And so, like I said, I was just like, I just want to take in the last days of this. And so anyways, we go through, and someone who is a coworker came up to me and just started sharing things going on in her life. And we're in the back room, and I'm like, listen, like, let's start praying right now. And she's like, right now? And I'm like, yeah, like, do you want to pray? And so we started praying. Like, I'm like full hands on her, like, we're holding hands, and I'm just like praying with her. Someone else who I usually talk to, usually the conversation is like very lighthearted, came up to me and shared some things that was going on, and that was deep, and I had no idea. And so we're in the break room just praying, and just being able to have the opportunity to just be able to give her peace in her situation, and just everything going on was just like, I saw God move in my heart and in the heart of others in the last days that I was there. And so I want this podcast really to just be an encouragement to you that whether you're in a season that you've been in for a long time and you're just like, God, when are you going to bring me out? Or you're in an in-between season, you're transitioning between two things. You're transitioning to things that you've known into going into things that you have no idea about. Or you're in the new season and you're like, oh, like, there's some struggles, or you're just like living your best life. Like, this podcast is for everyone in every season that you're in. And so there's just a couple different, like, mindsets that I want to, like, go on and talk about that I just feel like are super important. So I think one of the first ideas is that we can get future focused, right? So when we're in a season and we're in the middle of a transition, like me, I was going from my old job to my new job, I was becoming future focused, right? I was thinking about, oh, like, these are the places God's going to take me. I was so focused on, like, the future, but at the same time, like, God really showed me, like, focus on the now. And why that's so important is because when you're looking so far into the future, you're missing what God is doing right now in this time. Like, it might not be this huge momentous thing right in front of your face right away, but God is doing something, and he's doing things, whether it's like you can physically see it, or he's doing stuff in here and really helping mold and shape your heart into something new to bring you to the next place that he wants to take you. And so I think it's just so important to really, when we get excited, when we want to be somewhere else, when we've been in a season for a long time and we just want to be like, God, put me in the place that you have next for me. There is a reason why he's not bringing us there yet. There's a reason why we're staying. And maybe it's because we're sitting and we're so focused on the future that we're not learning what God is trying to show us now. Like, he can't bring us to the next place until he really shows us what he's trying to show us now. And like, I just think about like blessings that God might have for me in the future. Like, if he gave it to me now, I would probably royally screw it up, because there's some things that I need to learn first, before getting to those places, before really stewarding and unfolding the whole thing all together. And so I really want to talk about how, like, first off, the main scripture that I feel like everyone knows in regards to seasons is Ecclesiastes. And I'm just going to read the verses 1 through 13 and just kind of go over it a little bit. But it says, there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give away, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning. I know that there's nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. And so two things in there, well, three. First, you see like the different seasons that you can be in. There's a time for everything under the sun, like it says, and it just goes off and talks about all the different things that can simultaneously happen or happen at multiple times and stages in your life. The second thing that I love, it says that he has made everything beautiful in its time. And so, like I said, like, we want to jump to these next seasons. We want to go to these next places, but God has made something so beautiful in the now, in the present, in what we're doing right now, and what he's showing us and what he's molding in our hearts and teaching us and leading us to. And so that's something that is just so important. And the third thing that I love by this scripture is that it says, I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. And I love that it says in all their toil, because guess what, y'all? It doesn't say in some, it doesn't say in part, it says in all of their toil, to do good while they live, you know? So find satisfaction in all of your toil. Find satisfaction in all the things God's doing. And there's going to be rock bottom. There's going to be the mountaintops. There's going to be the in-betweens where you're kind of just stagnant. But there's a beauty to every single day that God has given us. And honestly, I just think that we can kind of get so absorbed in like, God, where are you taking me? God, what are you going to do next in my life? When are you going to bring this into my life? When are you going to bless me with that? But how many times, like, this was something that really convicted me, is like, we sit and including myself, all of this pertains to me as well. I'd love to make sure that is made clear, but we sit and we want God to bring us these blessings, and we can get so hyper focused on it. Like, God, what is my calling? And if we feel like we're not in our calling, we feel like we're just doing everything wrong. But really what God wants us to do in these times, especially the ones that are the most challenging, is not run away from God, but like run to him and say, God, like, I'm struggling, but you know what? Ultimately, whatever my circumstances, you are what fills my heart, and you are what fulfills every one of my needs. And this is easier said than done, but really just reflecting that even though we have certain sufferings and we have certain challenges, that we can endure them. We can persevere, and we are given strength through Christ. And not only that, but we are given a relationship with God. Like, it's a privilege in its own that we can just talk to our Father in heaven right now. Like, we can just pray to him right now and give everything to God and just lay it at his feet. And sometimes I just think, like, including myself, like, I can get so absorbed in, like, God, where are you calling me? Or, when's this next season going to happen? Or why did this happen in the past? Like all these different things, right? And so I think there's ways that we can, like, kind of get hyper focused, so we can be future focused, or we can also be focused on the past and we can be looking back. And so I really, like, love, whenever I think of that, is always Lot's wife, of don't look back, right? And just how she became the pillar of salt when she decided to look back at the things that God was taking them out of, right? Out of Sodom and Gomorrah, of the complete ruining of that city. God was destroying it and helping save them and protect them from it. But Lot's wife looked back. She looked back at the things God was taking her from, and she looked in the past and she got stuck there. And sometimes we can also get stuck on the past of, like, why didn't I do this right? Why didn't I do that? And I think it's just an invitation to, instead of look back with regret, to live every single day with, no, I know I did what God called me to do today. That is what I'm focused on. Because when you think about, like, the verse in Matthew, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. It has enough trouble of its own. That is true. Like, when we enter tomorrow, we can deal with tomorrow's stuff. I want to just deal with today. I just want to deal with the things God is trying to have me do today. We don't have the capacity to really just absorb and worry about everything, the past, future, and present, all at once. And I'm not saying it's bad to have aspirations. I'm not saying it's bad to reflect and have certain feelings that you're going through. That is okay. But just to not get stuck in it and not let it be in the driver's seat of your life. Let that be in the very back seat. Let it be all the way in the trunk, and let God take care of it. Let him be the driver, you be the passenger, and you guys just have that conversation together. Like, have your conversation with the Lord and get to know him. Get to know the one that is driving and in control of your life and taking you the places that he wants you to go. Because if we're not filled by him first, if we're not satisfied in who he is, nothing that we do for him, and most of the time, like, we're so worried about, God, where are you calling me? Like, I want to do these things for you, but do we know him? Like, he doesn't care about the things that we do for him unless we know him from a true, genuine place and a true, genuine heart posture. I felt led. The Lord brought me to the book of Amos. I've never read the book of, is it Amos? Amos? I don't know. Correct me in the comments. But Amos was a prophet of the time, and so he really was called to call out the Pharisees and be like, guys, like, this religion that you're living, which is a topic that I talk about all the time, and I love talking about it, because that's just something that I really feel has, like, been a part of my story, has just been really, like, the difference between religion and relationship. And so the book of Amos goes on to talk about it, and so Amos calls them out, and well, through the Lord's own messages, he decides to call them out and, like, guys, like, this is just not right. Like, they're doing all the sacrifices correctly. They're doing, like, they're in the old law, right? They're in the old covenant. And so when they're doing all these things, they're doing it properly, but they're doing it with the wrong heart posture. And so I want to read a section from Amos that really just hit me. And it's convicting. It's very bold. It's very, just, I guess you could use the word, out there, but God was just like, bam, right? So I'm going to read it. It's Amos chapter 5, verses 21 through 24. And it says, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. And so what I wrote in my Bible here as I read that, I just said all of the worship meant nothing because they don't know God on a personal level. They just did the rituals. God wants your heart more than materials or show. And it's true. Like the things that God is doing, stripping and pruning us of it now, that might be hurt, like it might hurt, it might be challenging, it might be uncomfortable. Like, it's better to be going through those things and just lean into God and be like, God, what are you teaching me through this? Like, and in the midst of that, just wanting to know who our Father is, like, God, I just want to know more of you. I just thought, I think it was a month ago or 2 months ago, I don't remember, but there was a moment that I had, and I really just thought about like me meeting the Lord face to face. And I just think about like in Matthew where he's like, they say like, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not do all these things, these miracles, healings in your name, all these amazing things? And the Lord said, I do not know you. Depart from me. And like right there, I do not know you. I don't know you. Like I want to meet Jesus face to face. And as soon as I see him, he's like, I know you. Like, come on in. Like, I know who you are. Like, it's not about what you've done. I mean, that's the thing is how we know him and what we do from that stems, and that fruit is produced from a heart of knowing and loving God so much that we produce things that he wants us to, that he leads us down the paths that he's guiding us to. And I think it's just so beautiful that if we start off really emphasizing our relationship with God versus the things that we're going to do in his name, none of it really is fulfilling or matters unless we have God as the first person we go to when we're struggling with something, or the place that we go for rest and refuge. Like all these different things just like really hit me in the midst of like all these past couple months of like being in this transition season and now in my new season, in many different ways. Just really leaning on God and just saying, wow, like I could do all these things for God. You could be so righteous. You could do all the right things. But God says, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Like these religious people were doing everything right in the old law, but God did not care because they did not know him. They did not know his heart. They didn't show his heart. They didn't care. It was all for a show. And so I guess this is really just an invitation for just a heart posture check for myself, for everyone listening, to be like, God, like, where's my heart at? And just like wanting to know more of you. Like, yes, lead me to those seasons that you want me to go to. I want to do things in your name, but more importantly, like, who are you, Jesus? And how can I get closer to you? And how can you speak to me in your own unique way? Like that in itself is something that's more fulfilling than anything else. I just think about like how I mentioned earlier, the podcast episode, the last one, and how it got like 800 some views upward now. And I look at the number, but the number doesn't like mean anything to me. Like just looking at like, oh, 800 views, like that doesn't like make me feel like important inside. It's like, wow, God, you're showing yourself to more people. People are able to experience you through this ministry and what you've called me to. And so just really like, I don't think if I had an intimate relationship, if I didn't have an intimate relationship with God and the podcast was out and all this other stuff, like I would just be doing it for all the wrong reasons and it wouldn't be fulfilling. And honestly, I don't think really ministry is supposed to be, I think to an extent, helping people and bringing them to God is supposed to be fulfilling. But the things that God calls us to is never really easy, right? And it challenges us and stretches us. And we're like, oh, this does not feel good. And that's intentional because I think God shows us like we don't need nor are fulfilled by these things. We want to make it seem like we all have it all together because everyone else has it all together, right? Or so we think. And it's really just not that way. And so I really just want to encourage you that like just really be close to your father. That's just like one of the most important things in the season that you're in, whether like I said, whatever that looks like for you right now, whether you're still living in an old season, you're in a transition or you're going into a new one, all of them require us to lean into God more than we ever have before. And the other thing too, when talking about this topic, right? I was really reflecting, and yes, the whole point about, not having a close relationship with God and just things not being fulfilling because of coming from that place of just doing things to do them. But also coming to God and really just honestly coming up to him like a genie, like, God, where are you calling me? I want to do all these things for you. And it kind of falls into what I was just talking about, but really just being like, God, like, I really want to know where you're leading me. And we seek him and seek him. And then we find a little piece. What God really showed me was he gave me a vision of like this puzzle piece as I was like just thinking about this whole topic and just really what he was showing me. So I like saw this puzzle piece, right? And while the puzzle piece, like, we can kind of make meaning from a puzzle piece, it has some portrait on there, right? The puzzle piece can't fulfill its full purpose unless it's in part with the other pieces and we see the whole picture, right? And so I envision someone going up to God, maybe it's me, and I go up to God and I'm like, God, like, show me where I need to go, like, just give me a sign, or just give me the next step of where you're taking me. And so he gives me a puzzle piece and I'm like, thank you so much, God. And then I take it and I run and I turn my back on God and I'm like, okay, he told me this, and so I'm going to focus on this and we're just going to go with it and we're going to roll. And it's like, the thing about that is like our whole life looks like each season is a puzzle piece, right? And as you build it up and build it up and build it up, you look back, you see the picture start to be formed, but until the very end, you don't see the full picture. And so that's like the importance of leaning into God at all times. He's walking through each and every season with us. Why not bring him along and have him continue giving us those pieces as we get to know him and love him more and more, to be able to see what he's forming, instead of just saying, God, thank you so much for this little puzzle piece. I appreciate it. Like, I'm going to go live my life now, because that puzzle's not complete. Like, it has some purpose, right? The little piece has some value. You can take something from it, but putting all the pieces together makes this huge, beautiful picture that you wouldn't be able to see from just the one little piece, right? And so I think about how I've said in other episodes, like, our faith, if we take step by step by step, like, God's never going to show us the full picture. He's going to be like, okay, cotton candy is your next step. I don't know. That's just a random thing. But like, he'll give you a small, small step. And every single day is taking that walk in obedience towards the bigger picture, towards the end step. But you can only see that. You can only go to the next step if you continue to lean into him and to lean into what he's saying and what he's guiding you to. And as you continue to have God just transform and mold your heart, you're going to continue to do the things that he wants you to do, because you're forming and emulating his character to the best of our ability, because we're human. But doing those things for him because of our love first from him, and not doing it out of a place of like, God, like, once I have this all together, like, I know that I'm saved and I know you're going to bring me to this place. Like, no, it's following the Father and finding his heart. And then from there, that fruit being produced on its own naturally. Okay, so I have kind of a funny story that I want to share. And I don't know if it's kind of embarrassing on my end. You guys probably wouldn't think it's that embarrassing, but it's definitely a first world problem. And I openly, humbly admit this before even sharing the story. But I think it applies to this podcast, and it definitely taught me some things. So get ready, I'll strap in for this little story. So it starts off with me wanting to upgrade my phone. I, have this Instagram page for this podcast as well. And so I make Instagram reels for it. And I have an iPhone 12, and my iPhone 12 has the baseline of gigabytes, so it has 64. It has probably 2 gigabytes left of storage, and I can't update it because the update is more gigabytes than what I have left in my storage. So long story short, the battery is kind of like crapping out. You know how Apple does that, and that was a whole thing that came out a couple years ago or whatnot, that they, make the old phones start to crap out so that you get the new one every so many years. So I decide, okay, they're having this deal for the new iPhone 16 and, whatever. And you can basically get it for cheaper price. So my dad and I decide, because, I'm still one of the youngins, so I'm under like our family plan and whatnot. So we try to upgrade it. And long story short, he orders it over the phone, and it's supposed to ship between so-and-so days, which is like 2 weeks out from when we ordered it. And it was this whole thing that it wasn't shipping out for like a week and a half. And I was like, what's going on with this? And I was kind of excited for the new phone. And so I was kind of getting impatient, kept asking my dad, like, did it ship? Did it ship? Because he had like all the information. So then we go ahead. And basically I take it upon myself to go to the store, the wireless store, to be like, "Hey, what's the process of my order?" blah blah blah. So we go through the whole rigmarole, and they call customer service for me. They can't figure it out, and then they're like, "Okay, your phone is supposed to come." So I'm like, "Cool. I'm just going to wait for it to come in." And it was, long story short, there was other stuff to it, but up until that point, I think God really showed me what I needed to see. So I'll kind of leave it at that, because it's a long, complicated, I think too drawn out of a story. And my dad would know. So anyways, yeah, basically up to that point though, it was like me wanting to jump and get the phone to come in, and I'm so excited for this new phone, and I'm like, yeah, like I really want to be able to have like more storage on it's really just for the storage and the batteries, right? I don't really care about this AI stuff. Honestly, I'm going to find a way to turn it off on my phone. I don't really know how I feel about it. But I just needed a new phone. I need a new like a new battery, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm like excited to get a new phone because it's been a little bit since I've gotten one. And so then I'm like asking my dad, like I said, like, when's this going to come in? And so then I go all the way through to going to a store, asking them, like, what's the process of this? And it's like, it's on its way, but it did not deliver or ship yet. But it's on its way. So, like, you can relax, Brie. So, like, I think I had, like, just this moment of, like, even with a phone, like, God showed me in that moment, like, Brie, you just need to relax, and you just need to wait, because it's going to come on time. It's going to come when you need it. And honestly, this whole phone thing has been a thing, like, in regards to, aside from what God was showing me through this, I feel like it really is a stupid, minuscule thing in life. And I learned that as well coming out of it. But really, like, what God showed me was, like, I tried to jump ahead. And honestly, if the phone was going to be a couple weeks out, I was going to tell them cancel it, and I was just going to get a phone in store. They didn't have the one that I wanted or needed. So again, I would just be settling for something so that I could get it quicker. And so that was the whole thing that God was just showing me of, like, in our life, in our seasons that we're in, and I know I keep saying seasons, but when we're in these times, we're wanting to jump, we're wanting to go to the next thing, we're trying to get what we want faster. And the matter of the fact is it's on its way. God is working on that behind the scenes. We don't see it, but he is doing it. But he's also doing something in here too. Like, he's not doing all the work behind the scenes, behind the curtain. Like, we're just waiting, and we're like, okay, God, like, just tell me when I'm going to pop my head in, and, I'll come grab the thing that you're preparing for me. No, it's like God is prepared. He's like, no, like, go back out there. Like, I'm having you work on stuff too. So when we bring it together, it all works. And it was just like a cool revelation that God showed me through something so minimal and so stupid. But it's true. Like, don't rush the process, because again, it could, like, for me, that whole situation was kind of like a dumpster fire. And I was like, this is a phone. Like, what's the reality, right? But in terms of like where we're going, it's like God will bring us there when we need to be. Like, I know that, and I can trust that. And so just building your trust with the Father is such an important thing too. So I hope that this minuscule first world problem story can encourage you. It really convicted me after of, like, not worrying about stupid stuff like that too. So I hope if you're dealing with the same thing, that you could, get some enlightening thoughts or ideas from this as well. But yeah, so it's just one of those things. But yeah, so the last thing that I really wanted to share too, that I thought was super cool, and I actually listened to their podcast, I think like 2 days ago now. Madison Pruitt and her husband Grant were doing a podcast episode, and they were actually talking about, like, going through seasons of transition. And this has been an episode that I've wanted to do for like months, like I think 2 months. But really, God has a cool way of, like, there are things that end up happening, and I don't end up sharing topics right away, but he's still showing me things that I need to share yet, like the other pieces of the puzzle that needed to get added to what he wanted me to share. So it wasn't the time until now, but I was listening to their episode, and so they were talking about the same thing. Like, it was funny, like, when I was listening to it, I'm like, cool, like, God really revealed some things, like, that they were sharing to me as well, like, on my own time. And they were talking about Ecclesiastes 3 and how there's different seasons. But the one thing Grant shared that I loved, and it was super insightful, was in seasons, right? God doesn't have us, like, live in summer all year long for 365 days, the same thing all the time, right? And you think about fall, and you think about spring as being times of, like, lush greenery that just continues to develop and be beautiful and bright and just vibrant, right? And you think about winter as the time where the leaves on the trees are like stripped. And when it's in that cold, dark season and there's just some things going on, like the branches are falling off, like there's snow on the trees and there's no leaves, they're all falling off, right? When spring comes, it allows the tree to be pruned, right? How, Jesus talks about like us being pruned, like abide in him, and remove the things that he is calling us not to be in, to continue to produce more of a harvest, to produce more. And when those trees in the winter that Grant said, like end up the leaves fall off, whatever, in the new season, they're able to produce more and be able to have more leaves, more vegetation. Like they can just multiply it versus what it was in the fall or whatever season it was in before. And even in the winter, I just think about like the snow on the trees and how it sparkles and how it's still beautiful, right? In the time of these trees just kind of being like I'm just kind of surviving right now. It's still beautiful because there's things around it that decorate it. And so there's things in our life that God uses to decorate our lives and things that we're going through. And so I think that was just such a cool thing that he shared that was like very insightful and just a lot of wisdom. So I thought that was cool and wanted to share that as well. So check out their podcast too. Um, but yeah, so I honestly like, I think the biggest thing and biggest takeaway in whatever season that you're in is really to lean into God and ask him like, how can I make the most of this? How can I steward this so well that when you bring me to the next place, like I know what I'm doing and I know why you've moved me here and I know like what I need to learn next. And I think it's really just a process. I think of like how the Israelites were going to be brought to the promised land and it could have been such a short amount of time that they get there. But they made it last 40 years and it was because of disobedience. It was because of them not wanting to really, I don't know the entire story of Moses. I actually haven't read that yet. So, always go back to God first about these stories and stuff. And never rely on anyone other than God to teach you first and foremost, including myself. But yeah, like the Israelites were brought out of where God had taken them, right? And then like they wanted to go back to their past or they wanted to go back to the things that they knew. And so like this took a whole long amount of time that basically prolonged them getting to this new place, their promised land that God had for them. And so don't waste the time. Really just take every single day. And that's something that I'm doing even in my new season is like, God, like I'm being so stretched and there's going to be new challenges that you're faced in new seasons and in new times and, not being overly knowledgeable about everything. And that's why God takes you there is to lean on him further. But to really say like, God, like, what do you want to show me today? And really making the most of it so that we're not wasting this time, just letting it blow by. And we could be learning faster the things that God wants to show us if we just continue to lean into him and have a close relationship with him. So I think that was really just like, in summary, like just everything God really has shown me about the places he's put us in, the places he's has us now and the places he's going to take us. And so I really hope that you can be encouraged in this. I hope that you can know that you're not alone in whatever season you are. If someone wants to comment below just what they're going through or if they need encouragement, please like let's make an encouragement chain in the comments of just like someone just needs an uplifting word of like, listen, you're going to get through this, or listen, in this new season, like God is walking with you, or like in this transition, like you are going to go the places God has for you. Just keep seeking him. And so I think the biggest thing is just continuing to lean into God, continue to just seek him always, put him first, before anything we can do for him. And really just let him fill our hearts and be the center of our attention, the center of our minds. Like I said in the last episode with Shaniqua, to just not be distracted, to just really lean into God. And that is a word for me. That is a word for me. To just really lean into him. And so I hope this episode was able to bless you guys. If you have any comments about like seasons or any insight, please comment below. Scriptures, whatever it is. And also make sure to subscribe to this podcast if you enjoyed it, and like and share with others, as well as follow our Instagram at Unscripted Faith Podcast. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for listening, and I pray that you have a blessed day and a blessed week. Bye guys.